Now I would like to move into our afternoon keynote. This afternoon's keynote focuses on the emergence of non-traditional and new forms of gaming in a modern casino. The session will begin with a presentation by Robert Rippee, Director of UNLV's International Gaming Institute and Esports Innovation Lab. Robert will then host a discussion on the trends in the gaming world with, I think, is a great panel of experts. It's Seth Shore, the CEO of Fifth Street Gaming, Tracy Nowak, VP Customer Experience Marketing with the Hakkasan Group, and Raul Sood, CEO and founder of Unicorn. But first, I'm going to take the opportunity to introduce Robert. Robert is a former Senior Vice President of Marketing for Las Vegas Sands Corporation. Brings more than 25 years of innovation experience in hospitality, along with a powerful network of advisors and mentors across venture capital, big tech, big hospitality, and gaming. He serves as a board advisor and consultant to several technology and startup companies, including gaming, robotics, and other B2B platform innovations. Robert is also a doctoral student at UNLV, researching consumer behavior with a focus on millennials and gaming, which will be the focus of his opening remarks. He holds an MBA from the University of Georgia's Terry College of Business, an undergraduate degree from finance at the University of Wyoming. He's also a decorated veteran, having served as a pilot in the United States Navy. So please welcome your panel to the stage and look forward to a very interesting hour of discussion and presentation. Robert, in the panel.
Particular? Okay.
Have a seat.
Wow, that's bright.
Good afternoon. So our panel, as Paul said, is a discussion on the emergence of non-traditional and new forms of gaming, and we'll get into that in a minute. We really are going to spend the first part of the discussion. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the research and a little bit about UNLV and what we're doing there. And then we'll get into it with my distinguished panel here, and I'll go a little bit into each of them, and they can introduce their companies. But first, a plug for UNLV. So I'm part of UNLV's International Gaming Institute. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the IGI, it's composed of several parts that you can see on the screen in front of you now. The Center for Gaming Innovation. Center for Gaming Innovation is responsible for development of new games, so just like it sounds. Both casino and social games. Of course, we have our much lauded executive development program, which operates every fall in conjunction with the University of Nevada, Reno. We have the International Center for Gaming Regulation, which is a new part of the IGI, which has started in the last year and a half. Down on the bottom of the screen are my two sections, the Hospitality Lab and the Esports Lab. And then on the right of the screen is the logo for the International Conference on Gambling and Risk-Taking, which many of you attended last year. So let me talk a little bit about my two labs, the Hospitality Innovation Lab and the Esports Lab. Briefly, the Hospitality Lab is, as Paul said, it's the lab where we're focused on the future of all types of resorts. So we look at robotics, we look at artificial intelligence and applications both in the gaming industry and the broader hospitality industry. My students come up with some of the ideas that are going to change these businesses. The students in the Hospitality Lab are a cross-section of students. I have engineers, architects, computer scientists, mathematicians, even a few law students thrown in now and then. Of the two, the more interesting one right now for this audience may be the Esports Lab. The Esports Lab was launched last fall, and in fact, I had the assistance of my panel here as speakers and in developing the class. And the esports class is really built around developing a model for esports in a casino. It's really not about game development. It's not about creating the gambling forms for the games. It's more about understanding how will this eventually fit into a casino resort. Again, my students are engineers and architects and computer scientists, so when you kind of mix that bunch together and you add to the fact that all of them are gamers, you come up with some rather interesting ideas. So we will roll into this fall with our second esports lab curriculum. As Paul said, my background's a little bit varied. I come from the industry side, as well as the academic side, and I'm in my second year of studying millennials and their changing behavior as a PhD student at UNLV. Did spend some time with Las Vegas Sands, so I have a little bit of everything in my bag of tricks. As Paul said, I'd like to reintroduce my panel. To my right is Mr. Rahul Sood, the CEO of Unicorn. In the middle is Seth Shore, chairman of Fifth Street Gaming. And down on the end, Tracy Nalowek, senior corporate manager with Hakkasan Group. It's really interesting, and when Paul asked me to do this panel, I began to think about who should I ask to join me? And I wanted to select individuals who, A, I had a great deal of respect for because of the role that they have had in understanding innovation and change, and B, because they are, in a sense, operators at the forefront of that role. They're not just academics in a college environment thinking up a theory and setting out to prove it. These people are living it every day. I also wanted to select people who were innovative, people who were not afraid to try new things and have experienced new things. So in each of their own ways, the three individuals up here with me are involved not only in trying to understand the future, but understand this audience, which becomes the most important audience for all of us. I'm going to step to the side on that for just a minute, because this is what I focus on at UNLV, and this is research. And research in particular around an overused phrase, the millennial. Millennial is nothing more than a generation. So we think of a generation as a 20 to 22 year period. And what we do know from a number of scientific theories, specifically around generational theory, is that behavior as consumers changes, and it changes over time. And we have found that within one generation, we have seen a radical set of change. Now, there are reasons for it, but it's identifiable, it's measurable, and many of you out there in your businesses, you already feel it. And that's this phenomenon called the millennial. We know that this is the largest generation in North America and will be for the next 20 years. So therefore, we know that their ability to influence economics and the economic factors is only going to get bigger. It's not going to get any smaller. The oldest of the millennials are already in their 30s, so they are beginning to approach their peak earning potential as a professional. So all of these factors lead to the importance of studying them and understanding them and the impact they are going to have on our businesses in the future. So really, are they that different? And it's difficult to say yes for all of them, because that would be untrue. But it is important to generalize and say that as a generation, there are certain elements of behavior that never happened before. And they can be experienced not just in gaming or in hospitality. You look at many industries today. You look at the retail industry. The retail industry is struggling desperately to figure out the answer to the millennial problem. Hospitality, gaming, people like this panel are not struggling, but they're at the forefront of trying to figure it out. From a scientific perspective, I can tell you that there are several reasons why this generation has demonstrated such an abrupt change from prior generations. One is this term called digital natives. This was created by another science researcher less than a decade ago in studying the generation. And it's simple. This is a generation that has never lived in a world without technology. It's native to them. And so consequently, it's had an impact. It's had an impact in ways that no prior generation could have possibly felt. My generation didn't have social media growing up or as a young adult. We didn't have the internet, and many of you did not either. And so that has to have some kind of profound effect. It has an effect in the behavior that stays with the generation. Parental cycles. Many of you out there are parents of millennials or of Generation Z, of small children. And when I say what happens at a soccer game for your children, everybody immediately knows. Everybody gets a trophy. What happens at the hockey game? Everybody gets a trophy. So that type of parenting, which has happened to this millennial generation, has created a behavior in them, a belief in their own kind of abilities that may or may not be present. Those things are called age location factors, and that's what generates generations. That's what makes us different. So it made the baby boomers, the Gen X's after us, and the millennials, and then soon to come, the Gen Zs. Each of those generations will be different, have been different, and are proven to be different. So in the context of that short discussion on millennials, I want to move into our discussion. So with our panel today, I've selected 3 experts from 3 very diverse areas. So Tracy on the far right works with Hakkasan Group, who is one of the world-renowned operators of restaurants and nightclubs, and just does an amazing job. If you've been in any of their facilities, you're just immediately blown away by this experience. So I thought she would be interesting because of their knowledge of this generation and experience and the role that those two and how they connect. Seth in the middle, the chairman of Fifth Street Gaming, is one of Las Vegas' true entrepreneurs. He's a different thinker. He tries different things, a risk taker, I can tell. And he's experimented with some things in his casinos that are firsts. And I thought this is a great person to have on a panel like this because of the insights that he's getting as a first mover. And Rahul, to my right, of course, a huge background in technology and VC and development of Unicorn, which is probably one of the game changers, hate using the word game, about games, but truly about this industry. And I think that they provide a very complementary panel because they each bring a slightly different perspective. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to ask each of you to kind of give us a little bit about your company. And in the questions I sent you, I said, tell us your mission statement. And I'm not looking for the make all employees happy mission statement. What is your company really about? What do you do? Let's start with you, Rahul.
Sure. So I think you can hear me. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm actually a native Canadian. I was born in Calgary, and when I was very young, I started probably what became one of the largest tech stories in Calgary. It was a high-end gaming PC company. We used to build personal computers to play video games on, and it was called Voodoo PC, and it sort of blew up, and we sold it to Hewlett-Packard. After that happened, I moved from Calgary to Seattle, and I joined Microsoft and started Microsoft Ventures. And I started to really spend a lot of time, because at Microsoft Ventures, we spent a lot of time with startups, helping them build and grow, and looking at industries that sort of needed disruption. One of the industries that I was super interested in, obviously esports is one, but secondly, it was sort of the gambling business, or the gambling industry, and seeing the trends that we were seeing with regards to millennials and their propensity to gamble or not in casinos and online and that sort of thing. So I started Unicorn with a friend of mine, and we started in 2014, and we're a company that sits at the intersection of video games, sports, and gambling. Our mission, our vision mission, is to be the planet's best bookmaker for esports, bar none. And when I talk about being a bookmaker, I'm talking about not only the spectator events that you watch, the professional tournaments where you can watch games and place bets and live bets and things like that, but also the skill aspect of esports. And we recently, just really quickly, we recently acquired a company in Las Vegas called Leet that helps casinos set up on-premise esport experiences. And we just announced our move into blockchain and Ethereum. Unicorn set up a token system called the Unicoin a couple of years ago. We've moved over $250 million of these tokens, and now we're going to turn it into a cryptocurrency. So that sums it up.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Seth?
Thank you, Rob. Way to win over a crowd, as I am a local Canadian. That's a good way to start.
They don't care.
Fifth Street Gaming owns and operates a handful of casinos in Southern Nevada. We've pride ourselves on being a company that identifies niche markets and comes up with a innovative experience for these markets. And whether that's the first Mexican entertainment district in Southern Nevada, creating a true urban casino in downtown Las Vegas, or most recently over the past 2+ years, exploring the world of esports and identifying how it can be integrated into the casino experience. Thank you, Rob. I like that Seth Shore risk taker. We have tried a lot of things. I think in taking risks, it's the only way to try new things and see what'll work, and not be afraid for some of those things to not work out. I think, Rob, you had a great introduction in terms of the changing consumer behavior. At this point, I think that's undeniable. I don't think there can really be anybody in this room that denies that every industry is changing. We're in a lot better shape than the shopping center industry. So,
Sure.
And there's no, in my opinion, no better industry than the casino industry to adapt, to innovate. In Las Vegas, we have gone through multiple reinventions of our own identity. The casino resort environment has been changing for decades. This is nothing new. And I think many of the things that we're going to talk about today are a part of the evolution of the casino business. It's not the silver bullet, but I believe we're going to discuss various tactics in a holistic strategy of making sure our industry is relevant to my 7-year-old son. Not at 7. When he's 21, of course.
Just a little older. Tracy?
I'm not a Canadian, sorry. Oop, is this on?
Yep, there you go.
Bostonian, any Boston people? Yay. Hey, I see you, great. Thank you again, Robert, for inviting us here. Again, my name is Tracy. I am the Customer Experience Marketing VP for Hakkasan Group. For those of you that might not be familiar with our organization, we do have a mission, and our mission really is around always crafting a better experience. And we're lucky enough to find ourselves in the nightlife, day life, lounge, and restaurant industry. And really that's what we do, is we create very compelling and very heavily experienced venues across the world. We have 50 globally, and we're growing year over year. And one of the interesting reasons why I'm here is we recently partnered with MGM Grand. For those of you, we have our premier nightclub called Hakkasan Nightclub within MGM Grand. On an average night, we bring through about 5,000 millennials. Wow. And we most recently partnered with MGM to help them develop that next generation social lounge that has a gaming component to it called Level Up. And so together we crafted and helped design, brand build, and program, and now managing the non-gaming side of Level Up, which is an open concept area within MGM Grand that's on their casino floor that is really, really geared to that next generation gamer.
Excellent. And it is a great facility. It really is enjoyable. Interesting, because one of the things I wanted to talk about was this idea of non-traditional forms of gaming beginning to enter the space. You're experimenting with it at MGM, or not even experimenting, you're actually doing it. Seth, you brought esports down and you talked about other things. Do you see more types of non-traditional games making their way into the environment?
I'd love to touch on one thing. You may not know, but I have an entity called Bet On Yourself Gaming that is actually gamblifying an experience that's at Level Up, Gulfstream, which is a laser-guided virtual golf experience. So in and of itself, I believe MGM and Hakkasan saw this as a great experience. It's a, much like Topgolf, this company developed this really sexy, fun suite with Hakkasan cocktail waitresses there, a fun environment for people to come and play virtual golf. The topography of the green changes, so it's a very, really great experience. And I partner with that company to gamblify this golf experience. We've already structured tournaments. We have peer-to-peer betting coming online shortly, and then eventually a true skill-based gaming where player versus the machine. I think the most interesting thing, though, that Tracy just said, and I think we all need to get used to in this industry, is a social environment with a gaming component, right? We used to be the casino business. Everything was about the casino. Guess what, guys? We now become a gaming component, and that's okay. I own and operate casinos. Sometimes nothing wrong with rooms revenue and beverage margins, right? I mean, they're a lot more predictable and, quite frankly, a great business. And I think as the integrated resort, we've seen this shift once again over decades, nothing new, but this is just another example of that. Creating social experiences, social environments where people come spend money, right? We're not in the business of freeloaders. You're going to come to our resorts, you're going to spend money on an experience, and we're going to create the most compelling experience to keep you there as long as possible. And there'll be a gaming component. So I really like how you put that.
I had the pleasure, maybe it was about a year ago, of taking a tour of your Omnia facility at Caesars. And it was in the daytime, so I wanted to see it. And I was blown away, not just by the decor, but by the thought that went into the social design of the space. You know, I think Seth makes a great point of this transition from being casino operators to social space. You're really designing experience, but you've been doing that for a while.
Yes.
I mean, your company focuses on the experience design. Where do you begin that process?
Really understanding your consumer. That's definitely step one. There's not many people who I think would, other than being in Disneyland or Disney World, stand in line for about 45 minutes to an hour to even walk inside of a venue. And so the experience really kind of even starts outside.
Yeah.
You know, and one thing about obviously this kind of next generation consumer that's really important to understand is, like you said, it's the sociability aspect of it. And it's also kind of the team spirit. So really when you think about those that come into, let's say, a large scale nightclub in Las Vegas, that's really kind of that next generation place that from a design perspective, you really want to bring to life. So
Yeah.
it's not just the line experience, it's also the visuals, it's you know, the production, it's the different locations within one facility, not just one kind of area that they visit. Omnia Nightclub has, you know, 4 or 5 different experiences within, same with Hakkasan Group, from its restaurant to a smaller club to a larger main room club to, you know, the mezzanine, all each, you know, providing a very, very, very unique and different experience.
So I have to ask you this, with 5,000 millennials a night, do you measure success in tweets per second?
Well, that is, we do. I mean, social is massive for us. I mean, not necessarily tweets per second, but you know, social media is by far, you know, particularly with our organization, our key marketing channel. No doubt, it's critical in what we do. But no, I think it's really, it comes in the form of obviously happy customers and the revenues at the end of the day. And they do spend. I mean, in just for example, from a nightclub perspective, you know, we sell tables. Tables, depending on who the talent is coming through, can range anywhere from $500 all the way up to $10,000 plus if you want to be seated right next to Calvin Harris. And they will pay. You know, but you have to be able to obviously provide, you know, the reasons for them to pay. And, you know, with Level Up, it's interesting because MGM, I think, was incredibly smart where they positioned Level Up, because it's actually, if anybody, I don't know who's seen it, but the proximity is literally right next to Hakkasan nightclub. So when you have, you know, the 4 nights that the nightclub is open, you have those mass audience, you know, who's coming into the club kind of experiencing Level Up. And we cross-sell it, you know, as kind of a good meeting location prior to going into the nightclub, which is really, really helpful. So we kind of add in, you know, not just one experience, but again, it's all about what can I do? What is my night going to be like? What are all the activities that I'm going to be within the nightclub and around the nightcllub? So
Excellent.
MGM has taken advantage of that for sure.
Great, great. Rahul, by the way, congratulations on your acquisition of Leet. Those are great guys. That's a very great move. Yeah, what's your perspective on this? I mean, you're focused on the digital space and esports. You come from a video gaming and tech background. But what about the other type? I mean, Seth's example of the golf game and other those things that are now starting to make their way into the resort. Will you be playing a role in those as well?
No, and it's not that I don't believe in them. I totally believe in gamblifying different experiences. But look, I was reading an article the other day. The median age for a PGA Tour fan is 69 years old. The median age for an MLB baseball fan is 54. Every day, an MLB fan and a PGA Tour fan dies, and 2 esports fans are born, right? Like, my business is esports.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is prepare this business for your future customer.
Yeah.
And we speak with regulators, we speak with people in this business every day. We are licensed currently for real money betting in the UK and Australia. And we've been testing the efficacy of our book in those countries for the last couple of years while we build out our technology. We also created the token, the Unicoin, so that we could open it up globally and build a social experience for these customers, for our users. And what we found is that, you may not believe this, but millennials have a propensity to bet, and they like to. They only like to bet on things that they understand. They don't like slot machines, and this will probably, it might come off and I don't mean this to come off the wrong way if you're a slot machine designer, but no matter what you do to those slot machines, whether you put Britney Spears in it or Pitbull or Eminem, it doesn't matter. Millennials will still walk by and go straight to the Hakkasan nightclub because that's what they like to do. They don't like to play on slot machines. And so what we're saying is, look, they do like to bet on experiences that they understand. So when we gamblify something, we focus on the games that they love. We're doing things like League of Legends and Dota and CSGO, like the big games. Mm-hmm. And we're building an experience that they feel comfortable in. We're embedded in the community. We build an authentic experience. We own part of teams. And all of that is super important to building relevancy with this audience. Otherwise, you're going to end up wondering what the heck just happened to my business, right, over time. So
I got a question for you, follow up to that, and it has to do with some things I've read in research. The game genres that you use and the examples you use, why do they love those games so much?
Good question. So the games that they love to play tend to be fairly complex, and they tend to be very fast-moving. The best example I can give is why is it that universities are now offering scholarships for top esports students, right? So if you go to, I don't know, there's different, Robert Morris University, but there's other universities that are out there and soon to be Ivy League universities that will offer scholarships for top players of Dota and League of Legends, for example. And the reason is, if you're at the top of your game in that game, you are an incredible leader, you're a good collaborator, you work well under pressure, you make decisions really quickly, and you're really, really good at math. You're basically everything that the university needs in a student to be the best of the best. And so that's why they like it. I mean, it's challenging, it's interesting, it's a skill where they know if they're good or not, and they know how good they are, whether they can beat this or not, right? Versus a slot machine, I've tried. Believe me, I've interviewed people and I've sat young people down in front of slot machines and observed them. And they sit there, they don't know, first of all, they don't know what all the buttons do. It's not very intuitive, right, to a normal, younger person, I guess. And secondly, they know that their chances of winning are up to the machine. So pressing buttons and that sort of thing is just not interesting, not engaging to them. And you can turn the slot machine into a nightclub-like experience. You're still going to see 100-year-olds sitting at those machines, right? And that's just what it is. That's yeah.
I can like to add to that if it's okay.
Yeah.
I'd argue, in addition to the reasons that Rahul mentioned as to why universities are offering scholarships, universities are also very smart at marketing and maintaining their relevance. So, why do universities have great sports teams? It makes other people want to go to that university. So, our industry can take a clue from universities. If they're integrating esports into their experience and as part of their brand, so should commercial industries as well. And I think almost you'll see every university offering scholarships soon enough. The point on slot machines, also, I think Rahul is making a factual statement at this point. I mean, I see a lot of gamers come into our property. We do offer esport tournaments, a couple times a week. Actually, they are operated by Elite, the company that Rahul recently acquired, which is a great organization. And yes, these young men and some women are not compelled to play the current slot product. For all the reasons that Rahul mentioned, I agree with. But I'd throw out there that it's the concept of chance-based wagering that it doesn't make sense. To probably my generation, certainly the baby boomer generation, there is something incredibly comforting about the passive action of sitting at a slot machine, having your cocktail, you used to smoke your cigarette, and sit back and cross your fingers. And that was very comforting. To almost every millennial I've engaged, that seems kind of asinine. They want to be more engaging. They grew up on iPads.
Right.
The Generation Z, forget about it. They grew up being rewarded by their skill. They got more points in the iPad game, they got more virtual credits, and they want that same experience. I do think, in my limited experience, that they get the house edge, right? They get that it's still gambling, but they at least want to know, much like an advantaged video poker player, that at least their skill will give them the optimal results. They want to know at least their skill is going to give them an edge over the player next to them that has no skill. And I think that those concepts are not completely foreign to our industry. We just have to modify our thought process and our approach. I've also found that a lot of this segment, if they are going to gamble, so if they find themselves stuck in a casino, they'll venture into the table games. There is a social component to table games. There is a concept that there's more skill involved. So that's good, but as a casino operator, at least I'll tell you that the idea of a future casino only being live table games is a very scary proposition. We need to replace the current slot product with a similar product with, obviously not a lot of volatility and low labor. So.
There's an interesting bit of scientific research that explains the phenomenon you two are talking about. It's based on a theory called uses and gratifications theory. That's a sociological theory that says that we play those type of games because they satisfy certain psychological needs within us. One of the most prominent being the idea of challenge. That's what you're referring to, Rahul. The software loop in the game, the more you play, the better you get. The game teaches you to play to get better as well. I have a personal theory that also happens in entertainment, that the more you go to the nightclub or the day club, the better you get at it. So if it's chasing someone of the opposite sex is your goal, the more you go, the better you get at it. So I think there's a relationship between this behavior.
Is that why the guys buy the $10,000 tables?
I'm pretty sure.
To get the girls?
I'm pretty sure there's a theory that underlies that. So I think that relationship is there as well, the challenge and whatnot.
Right, and all you can't do alone. And I think that's a really important component, is just sitting at a slot machine by yourself is just not as interactive as this next generation likes to be. It's always about being, with another person or a third or a fourth. And again, it's that team spirit, whatever it is that you're doing. So.
Right, they're highly socialized.
Yeah, actually, that brings up a good point. I've got young kids, and my wife one day sort of said, like, our little guy, she's worried about him because he doesn't bring his friends over ever, right? And she's worried that he has no friends. But what she doesn't know, and what I know because I spend time in his world, is the kid has hundreds of friends, and they're all online, and he's playing with them, and he really enjoys that experience. So the social experience is important, but the social experience doesn't always have to be in person. It can be online amongst friends. And I think you'll note that when you go to a nightclub or a restaurant, you notice people are using their devices because it's part of the whole, it's where we're going. So if you wonder what your kid is doing for 9 hours on the PC playing games, go spend some time and look, because it is a fascinating world, and it is a world that is absolutely taking over. There's one other thing that I should mention regarding that is, Mark Cuban is one of our investors, and he's been a huge proponent for esports. And he was one of the big reasons that the NBA recently announced esports teams. So I think there's, what, 14 teams or 17 teams that the NBA is creating. So the E-Mavericks, the E-Celtics, the E-whatevers, like they're going to have a combine this year, and they're going to pick the best of the best players. They're going to be a draft, and they're creating jerseys, and the game itself is an NBA game, and we're going to have odds on it. It's ridiculous. I mean, to think that people are going to be playing video games and watching this, they're doing this to attract young people to the basketball games. Pretty cool. Yeah.
Very cool.
So I'm going to ask you a different question here. I'm going to change the direction. In the beginning, and we have been talking about the differences in the behavior of a younger generation, call it millennial, call it whatever you want. Do you really think it's going to be sustained? Do you think that, I mean, there's a theory among many gaming executives that eventually, as they age, they'll fall into a norm, right? And the slot machine may become a little more popular with some of them, or traditional skill-based games may be more popular. Do you think that theory will hold?
I mean, you mind?
Go.
Like, you know, you could have said the same thing about the horse. You know, people get back into horses, and you know, they won't get away from cars, or you know, there's all sorts of things that people could talk about. You know, I want a digital watch or a calculator. I'm not going to use my computer. I really think that they need to get caught up with what's happening and spend some time in the world. So, no, I disagree with that personally.
Seth?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some retail executives that are holding out on the shopping mall too. I mean, but I'd throw this out there. There's nothing that I'm experimenting with that disrupts our current business. No seasoned, experienced executives that are responsible to investors and their team members should make a decision to depart on what's working today. Nobody's suggesting that. That would be crazy. What is being suggested is start to slowly implement what is very likely the future into our current experience. It fits. It fits. So why not do it? If we're talking about risk, the capital risk that's needed to do the things we're talking about is a hell of a lot less money than building a $100 million nightclub or showroom, by the way. There are ways to maintain our relevance and try new things without disrupting our current market. We're in the integrated resort business that has all sorts of multiple verticals and channels. This is just one new one. And that's why I would be surprised that any significant organization, and most are, let's face it, the major casino organizations that that I know of in Southern Nevada are fully exploring this. Some are taking a bigger leap of faith than others. Some like to talk a lot, but I don't think anybody is ignoring this and thinking there's not going to be some long-term change.
Right, and I agree with you, Seth, definitely. I mean, it does have to evolve, and I think one of the big reasons, particularly when you look at the younger demographic that we actually haven't talked about, is just sometimes with the gaming, it's a little bit more of an intimidation factor, and not so much a comfort factor of something, you know, them sitting down, let's say at a table game that they're not, you know, used to playing, or they don't understand. They just are highly, highly, highly intimidated. So I think, you know, as the world evolves, you know, it's just thinking about how can we evolve in a more social way, in a more fun way, in a less intimidating way, but for sure it is evolving. I mean, it's real now, and it's out there.
You know, so we've touched on esports a little bit, and I'm glad we haven't focused solely on that. It is, you know, somewhat of an exploited topic, but the sports industry very quickly, I mean, in a matter of years, accepted and embraced the concept that video game professionals are athletes. I mean, that could have been a debate for 20 years, and it wasn't. I mean, now, it was actually harder probably for me to convince a 65-year-old casino manager that these young kids who we had stay in our hotel for 6 months were video game athletes than it was for sports executives to embrace it. You think the sports executives would have been more offended by that concept.
Right.
Yeah, they embraced it. They saw the similarities. Yeah, my casino manager fought tooth and nail to accept these kids as athletes, and they are. So, you know, I think it's important to be open-minded and to accept the changing times.
That's a good question. I mean, good comment. I mean, I'm really curious. How's that going? You're mixing a culture of traditional casino employees, and now you're mixing them into something that they're kind of completely unfamiliar with it, and then you're way into it.
It was a process. So 2.5 years ago, we started to explore esports with the idea of holding tournaments and having peer-to-peer and skill-based gaming, still a strategy that we are very focused on and continue to make progress. Serendipitously, I made an arrangement with a team owner to have their team move into our hotel. The game was Counter-Strike, which is, arguably top 3 games in the world in terms of popularity. The team that moved in at the time was a very relevant team, one of the 5 best teams in the world. They came and they lived with us. We built them a training facility. We set them up with rooms and food. And it turned out, and like I said, this was luck, this wasn't my genius plan, that this was the best way to introduce our staff to this new culture and this new demographic. So learn what the professional gaming athlete needs, what they expect, and then that's the best way to understand what their fans and followers like and expect as well. So we got this crash course. There was definitely a little bit of a little pushback. There was even pushback, fast forward a few months, when we started to hold tournaments in our casino. Okay, so what does an esport tournament look like? We had a couple dozen PCs and gaming consoles, anywhere from a couple dozen to 100 people are coming, paying a fixed entry for a fixed prize, so technically not gambling, but this is a contest or tournament. And as we were starting to roll these out, in the boardroom, there were some concerns of how is this new demographic going to mix with the casino crowd? And will the typical casino customer feel disrupted? Okay, valid concern. Who knows? We tried it. It turns out that it did not disrupt the casino environment in any way, shape, or form. If anything, it was very additive to the overall enthusiasm and excitement. When you have 50 kids playing in a Madden football Xbox tournament and they're yelling and screaming, it's like having a hot craps game. It's really fun. It's really exciting. And it actually complemented the experience well. What we found out, and this is something we're working on today, is it was actually the gamers that didn't love being in the casino.
Right.
They didn't really love the smoky casino. They didn't love the music. They didn't love on a Saturday night hearing the guy on the mic giving away the Corvette or Thunderbird. It wasn't their ideal environment. So we've since created a separate environment for the gamer.
Interesting, and your space is amazing. I've been in it. I was in the old one and the new one both. I'm curious if you look at a lot of media phenomenon, social media being a great example, that began and picked up momentum with younger people, but then it rolled backwards. The adoption, older generations adopted social media, and I think right now the fastest growing demographic on Facebook is an older woman. So do you think that's going to happen? Is there a chance that esports that there'll be an adoption curve to the existing casino customer or an older clientele?
My 89-year-old grandmother stays up at night playing Words with Friends and Candy Crush. So if that experience is gamblified, she would be more inclined to play a game like that than a Buffalo slot machine.
Yeah, and the flip side to that is, I started out playing games when I was a kid. I started a gaming company, and I'm in my early 40s, and I still play games. Like I play League of Legends every day, at least one game a day. So the flip side is if you grew up playing it, you're going to continue playing it as you get older. And my mom, she just turned 70. And on her 70th birthday, I just drove her to the casino, and she sat on the slot machine all day. But she also plays Candy Crush, so, yeah.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
Seth, do you play any games?
I'm sorry?
Do you play any games?
I do. I play with my son. Probably inappropriately, I let him play Mortal Kombat and all sorts of games he shouldn't play. When he got into Minecraft, I thought that was a lot healthier. But no, we play a lot of games. Absolutely, I think generally in the video game industry, we will continue to see not a shift, then a bigger population playing mobile games. Also great for the experience that we're talking about. You know, mobile games fit very well in a nightclub, arguably better than having, you know, a bunch of PCs. So I do, and I think it's very fun.
How about you, Tracy? Playing games?
I don't. I have an 8-year-old who loves movies instead. So we do a lot of movie watching instead.
Excellent. That's a good practice. I play Destiny, by the way, so 3 of the 4 of us. So let's kind of take one more direction change here and flip ourselves. Seth, you're already there, you're an operator, but let's put ourselves out there in the audience as being operators. And let's look to the future. And for each of you, let's theoretically say you're a member of the Canadian Gaming Association. I want you to say, what are your top 3 concerns about the future? Raul?
What are your top 3 concerns about?
About the future.
Generally speaking.
Generally speaking.
Is the air and water we breathe going to be?
As it relates to gaming.
Okay, got it. Well, I think your biggest concern should be that if you aren't looking at your future customer now, you won't have a customer later. So as I mentioned those age statistics to sort of give you an idea of where things are going. Now, think about this for a moment. I'm talking crazy future, right? But like with gene therapy and the way things are going with, drugs and performance-enhancing drugs and things like this, I believe that in the next, certainly in my lifetime, in the next, say, 30 years, there's going to be drug therapy where people become almost like superhuman, where they're basically turning into physically fit, longer life, like they have a much longer lifeline, and there's going to be a big focus around that. So when you think about that, what are these people going to do for entertainment? At the end of the day, people are strong, they're physically fit, they tend to focus on health and things like that. What do they do for entertainment? Sports are changing. The demographic for the fan base of sports is changing. PGA is going to change and probably fall off. F1 racing is already falling off. Basketball is different. Basketball has a younger audience, but my point is that the fan base for these sports is changing. So esports is super interesting, and what they'll probably do for entertainment is watch and participate in esports. So if I were in the Canadian, Gaming Association, I would really look at what is the future customer doing and why are we ignoring them, or how can we start to engage them? And I think Seth probably has the best answers for that.
Well, I was just going to say that the Canadian healthcare program is clearly better than the United States, so there will be more superhumans here in the future than in the United States. Look, I think maintaining relevancy is something that in any business we're always concerned with. I'd like to answer the question differently and state that every jurisdiction, region, and even casino is going to have a different strategy that makes sense to stay relevant. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution. All casinos aren't equal. We all cater to different guests and different demographics, and so I would just suggest to find that thing that fits in your casino. It was a lot easier, I think, for MGM or some other high-end casinos to have people gamble on golf, right? Not a stretch to think people are going to gamble on golf, right? I actually had a regulator look at me and be like, yeah, I gamble on the golf course all the time, which is obviously illegal, but it's a thing that we do, right? So the gamification of golf is not a stretch to our current audience of any generation. Gambling on video games, whether it's spectators betting on the outcome of a professional match or people gambling against each other, is not going to be a stretch if your current clientele is in their 30s. So I think it's important to find out and experiment with what works for your current customer. I was on a WestJet flight yesterday from Las Vegas to Vancouver, obviously, and I felt like I was on the Macau ferry. I mean, I have not been on, so clearly, baccarat is going to be important, and I wouldn't abandon, that in a casino anywhere near Vancouver. Although I would, I did observe that the heavily Asian population on the plane was very young, incredibly young. So electronic baccarat and things like that, I'm certain is a part of the strategy here.
Tracy?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to just embracing and adopting, obviously, your evolving market segments. Particularly, again, the millennials. There's 75 million of them. That's quite a lot. And prior to joining Hakkasan Group, I actually worked with MGM Resorts for almost 10 years, and there was a lot of focus there on kind of the baby boomer market, the Gen X, Gen Y, so to speak. And when I moved over to Hakkasan Group, it was definitely a surprise and a shock. Really learning and understanding and identifying with this growing and now largest population segment that we have. So I just think it's really important to understand who they are, embrace them, and don't be scared, to try different things, because they like that, and they like the evolution of what we offer. So.
You touched on, all three of you touched on some of the elements for my last question here. This has to do with the result of what I do in the esports lab. So I present the students with all of the building blocks, and I say, what does a casino resort look like in the future? So now I'm going to ask you the same question. I want you to get out your crystal ball and project 5 or 10 years downstream and describe for me, what does if there is such thing as a typical casino resort, what does it look like? What is that experience like? Let's go together, start down to Tracy this time.
So the way that I see it is I see a gaming floor that actually can have some very, very, very high energy locations that are heavily programmed. We've kind of made up our own little term. We kind of call it barcading, which is almost like bars and arcade experiences mixed with gaming. It's kind of like all three combined. Again, high energy, a lot of collaboration, cheering of each other on, all the way through to, I think, still the traditional. There's something to be said that, the traditional isn't wrong. Obviously, it's been amazing to all of us, but I see that a wide range, a spectrum of, high energy all the way down to maybe what we're used to seeing. I also think, that open concept and really a modern feel is really important to, that next generation. And again, really honing in on that social side and just constantly evolving. Las Vegas is great. We do that all the time, as it relates to changing out restaurants or changing out a store. But, really, it's almost like taking that evolution concept and say, how do we do that now on our gaming floor? So.
Seth?
Smoke-free, for sure. We will learn and adapt from Tracy's industry. I made this comment, when I was on a panel recently, and I hope I didn't offend someone very important to me, and I'll say it again because I still believe it's true. When Wynn Las Vegas opened in 2006, it was, arguably the most innovative, certainly the most beautiful casino in the world. And the way that the symmetry, the way that it's activated on all sides, the way that light comes in, the design, the decor, everything about it, who didn't walk in there and say, wow? But if you looked at the actual casino, there was nothing innovative about it. It was the same rows of slot machines. Sure, the rows are a little smaller, and sure, there's some pods, and that's about as innovative as our floors are. But ultimately, it's the same. If Rahul and I are hanging out and I'm gambling and he's not, where does he go? Yeah, maybe there's a center bar 100 feet away, or there's a restaurant, but the casino will be more of an integrated space, more like a nightclub where people can eat, drink, hang out, and there'll be a gaming component, as Tracy said. I think things are going to be priced differently. If you want a live dealer, the minimums are going to be higher. We're not going to be dealing to, $10 or $15 tables. A $10 or $15 table will be an electronic table game, but in the not too distant future, there's going to be a lot more artificial intelligence and a lot more of a interactive experience. It's not a stretch. So those experiences will be more unique. I think we will figure out a skill-based component. You're going to see things that look an awful lot like video games, and that's my prediction.
Well, I think that the physical space of the casino, there'll probably be less of them if you think about wagering experiences going beyond just a casino floor. What I mean by that is, Raiders Stadium is a good example of what's happening in Las Vegas. The NFL is starting to come around. I imagine, watching a sport live and having some sort of device where you can place live bets watching the sport and have other experiences that go around with that. The other thing is, for entertainment for me and people that I hang around with, we love going to a place called virtual. It's called Virtual Games, but it's basically a space where you go and you are playing Counter-Strike or Call of Duty in real life. So you wear a vest, you have a fake gun that articulates when you shoot it. You have sensors all on you, and then there's screens everywhere that show leaderboards so that you have instant gratification as to how well you're doing. And you're basically playing CSGO real life in real time. I see a space like that in the future where it implements augmented reality and you're blending a physical world with the virtual world and playing, a real life video game. So I don't look at the traditional casino space and say, how do we save this business? I look at it and I say, like, what can we do to kind of cater to this audience in small areas and experiment to figure out what the future looks like.
I want to throw one more thing, and I agree with Raul. People, our team members, will play a different role. So 99% of the functionality will be done on devices, will be efficient, computers, robots, programs. Nothing will ever replace the importance of personality and building human relationships in our business. Yep. I think no matter what innovation and what change, the casino environment is always going to be about building relationships and loyalty, and that can only be done through human interaction. But now we can take our best and brightest and friendliest people and have them do one thing. Go become friends with our guests. Go build relationships. Don't waste your time doing stuff that we can have machines and kiosks do. Yeah. And I think that'll be a great benefit to our business.
High tech, high touch.
Well, to close, I'd accentuate what you all said and described your casino of the future with what my students have described. And they have described everything that you said. So the millennial generation sees the interactive space. They see the crossover. They see the high entertainment component. They see things like video or virtual reality and augmented reality. They see a high-touch service environment because they see the appropriateness of that. They see great food and unique food. They see unique beverage all integrated into one space. So you got an A on the assignment.
I also think, by the way, I think the first casino to offer wallets, like to host wallets of cryptocurrencies, is going to be the biggest, baddest casino in the world. Like, I think the first one to do that properly will be unbelievable. So, yeah.
Well, that concludes our session. With that, I'd like to thank our panel here.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
And thank you all, and all my best for a great conference.